What's going on, Philadelphia? It has been 34 days since Elliott Shore Parks was publicly called out by Deshaun Jackson, and he has not responded to anything. A big nothing burger of silence. Oh, and speaking of nothing burgers, this is what I wanted to get into today. I know that you're probably upset with both sports radio stations in town trying to fan the flames of a Jalen Hurts, Nick Sirianni rift, okay? However, I think I'm with him. I'm so sorry to say that to you on such a beautiful week, and I hope you're enjoying your week. But yes, there is a rift between Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni, I believe. No one really knows. And where this started, if you're unfamiliar, is both sports radio stations in town listened to the 12 minutes of audio between Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni last week as minicamp was wrapping on up, and they asked Jalen Hurts, what's new about the offense? And he basically, in an honest moment, I believe, said, 95% of it's new. To which Nick Sirianni moments later went, no, I mean, 95%, that's ridiculous. Yeah, maybe like 50%. You know, and then multiple hosts on both sides of the radio station aisle just said, look, see, this is a prime example of QB1 and head coach not getting along. And first and foremost, before I get into the rest of that, if the quarterback and head coach get along, it doesn't matter, especially in this situation. So I don't know if you were expecting me to say that, but that's what I firmly believe. Yes, Nick Sirianni and Jalen Hurts probably don't get along, and it doesn't matter. There are so many other people on that team that like Nick Sirianni, that vouched for him and spoke up to it. It doesn't matter. There are so many other players on that team. Jalen Hurts is not so selfish that whatever he wants to do on the offense is going to be detrimental to the rest of the team. Otherwise, he's Carson Wentz, and you'll see a lot more articles about it. But I don't think that's going to happen here at all. What I did think happened at this press conference was Nick Sirianni simply just protecting competitive nature here. Why would you want the first 4 weeks of the season of opponents wanting to know that you've completely changed your offense? Keep them busy in that bullshit Nick Sirianni offense you were running last year, right? That's all he was doing there. Doesn't mean they're not on the same page. And also, they don't have to be because Jalen Hurts needs to be on the same page with Kellen Moore. Nick Sirianni should have no more real offensive thoughts towards what they need to do on game day. That's been pretty established by now. And I think Jalen Hurts probably knows that the most out of any one of us talking about this situation. It is evident that man can't call plays. Jalen Hurts knows it. He saw it in 2021. Then Stoutland and Steichen took over. 2022, they go back to the Super Bowl. Jalen has one of his best, obviously his best year of his career so far, gets paid because of it. Make sure that A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith are with him this year because of it. And Howie Roseman clearly hired the coaches or allowed the coaches to go. We know that now. You know that Nick is powerless. We've been over this. He's a puppet. He's a great puppet for what we think a head coach could be. And I don't think he's doing that. I think Nick is doing a phenomenal job teaching the rest of that locker room exactly what they need to be doing, philosophically, in life, etc. I still believe he's an emotionally intelligent teacher, except when he's on the sidelines and Dom has got to hold him back, right? And stop him from fighting linebackers or whoever it is. But at one point, even last season, you saw Jalen Hurts pulling in Nick Sirianni during a review because he was talking smack to somebody on the field, a fan, whatever. Probably not vibing so well. We also saw Jason Kelsey, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith to an extent, voice their frustration on the field at Nick Sirianni for one reason or another, right? It's easy to go, Brian Johnson screwed this up, but A.J. Brown vouched for him too. Somebody had to go, and we knew it was going to be the coordinators. They had to be the scapegoat, but we all need to do our jobs better. So who do you think is happy about this current situation? Jalen Hurts? You think he's happy that Brian Johnson got fired, that he got pinned for all of the offensive woes last year when we already know that Nick Sirianni was in that headset, confirmed by Tim McManus, throughout the first 7 weeks of the season, and obviously beyond, because it kept getting worse and worse. Jalen probably calling his own plays at some point. I would be. A.J. Brown freelancing. He said he already was. Everyone was doing their own thing last year. Brandon Graham admitted as much last week, too, when he said not only is how we going to fix this with the OCs, they didn't have the right ones. No one was communicating. Everyone at some point has said, between GM, coach, and players, none of it was working. No one was on the same page. So if I'm Jalen Hurts, and you fired the guy that got me to be able to take this team back to a Super Bowl, was a large part of that, believed in me when I got benched at Alabama, transferred to Oklahoma, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The first time he gets to work with me one-on-one, zip, you're out of here. And Jalen Hurts has way more power than Nick Sirianni does in that team, locker room, front office, however you want to define it, as long as he keeps winning, keeps getting paid, and shows to Howie Roseman and Jeffrey Lurie, his true bosses, and Kellen Moore, now I will say, that this is no big deal. I will, not go out of philosophical team identity here, but this shit needs to change. And if it's not going to be Brian, it has to be Kellen, or I don't know. I don't know exactly how much influence Jalen has, but I know it's way more than Nick Sirianni. And don't you think that would make Nick a little upset, too, that his quarterback has lost a little faith in him? I don't believe that you can go through an entire offseason with the short amount of time that everyone has off for personal and, strategizing what to do for next year. You can bro hug this thing out as much as you want to, but, last year, and granted, no one can get a read on Jalen's demeanor because he always tries to say he's even killed, but no one can do that emotionally, not that well. And I felt there was a lot of frustration on the sidelines, whether it was towards Nick or just everything that's going on. I'm here to say, even if it is at its worst, let's say both radio stations are right and this thing is out of control bad, it still doesn't matter. It matters if Kellen Moore and Jalen Hurts get along, and so same with A.J. Brown and all of that. As long as they're on the same page, and I don't think Jalen Hurts is the type of person that is just going to go out there and say, I know better. He's clearly trying to understand Kellen Moore's offense because he knows it's going to take him back to the Super Bowl. Thank God you finally found somebody that Nick can be okay with, that no one's going to interfere with, that somebody trusts. I just want that. If I can't have Brian, if I can't do this, then I just want that. I could absolutely see that happen. Money is more important, and winning is more important to all of those guys that are in that locker room, and I fully believe that, even if Nick and Jalen don't really get along that well, however bad or fabricated it might be. But I'm not going to dismiss some articles that are coming out from Nick's side, the front office's side, saying Jalen didn't handle this pressure well. Of course he didn't. Who did? Nobody did. No one handled the spiral that was that last season. No one handled it well. And how could you handle it well? You don't have a defensive coordinator. You're self-scouting. Come on. Let's wake up here. So, yes, again, I want to reiterate this. I don't care if they get along. If they do, great. Mike Ditka and Jim McMahon hated each other. And if you understand that reference, it's time to get a colonoscopy, by the way, because that is a long time ago. I mean, he didn't even get along with Buddy Ryan, Mike Ditka. And somewhat of Nick Sirianni kind of reminds me of him as much as he reminds me of Dick Vermeil. Isn't that crazy? Mike Ditka was just a drill sergeant that had a lot of talent around him and an unbelievable defense where he didn't have to do much on the offensive side of the ball other than hand it off to Walter Payton and get mad at Jim McMahon for fucking calling bombs instead of screens. That's it. That is basically it. And we are at the same steps that right now with Nick Sirianni. And again, I'm okay with that because that's Nick's best asset, teaching, motivating, etc. I love it. Make the other 90, 89 guys in that locker room happy throughout training camp. Have some input with the coaches. You obviously will, but let Kellen do his thing. Let him hang his hat on this. And again, I'm not saying this as Kellen Moore is going to fix everything. He has had his struggles in Dallas and Los Angeles that are absolutely his as well. I think this is a much better position than dealing with Mike McCarthy and whatever the hell of the Chargers organization actually is. I feel like Satan runs that place, So I'm excited, and even if this rift is a million miles long, they're still going back to the Super Bowl, guys. It really doesn't matter. And why would I care, or why would you care, if Jalen Hurts doesn't have the respect of Nick Sirianni? He fucking shouldn't right now. Even Jonathan Gannon called you out, and he was right. It's okay to not respect Nick Sirianni for halting your career. And if I was Jalen Hurts, that's what I would be thinking at this point in time. I told you last offseason that everyone was going to go into this Jalen Hurts is going to regress thing simply because, it was a punt on everything, including talent and coordinators, to make that happen. And they still somehow won 11 games stupidly. Imagine what happens when we're on the same page with all that talent again. So I also thought it was interesting. I appreciate our good friend Barney as much as he drives me crazy, and I accidentally called him a dumbass last night when I was the dumbass. So I like to publicly apologize for that. But I don't know if you saw, Jeffrey Lurie is looking for some minority ownership stakes in the Philadelphia Eagles, and I am so unsure of how that process goes. And, of course, Rob McElhaney was desperately holding his hands up, and I'd love to know who you think the best celebrity or Philadelphia person would be the best owner of the Philadelphia Eagles, at Bell and the Bird, at John Barchard on Twitter and Instagram. I had another thought, too. I was like, all right, that's interesting. And obviously Jeffrey Lurie's been prepping his son to take over the business at some point, so maybe that is a part of this, obviously. But if it is to free up a little more cash to say, I don't know, buy the Flyers, I hope that's what he's doing. Can I tell you why? One, emotionally, every time that a highlight, especially when Jim Jackson posts on Twitter, of the 2010 Cup run comes up, I can't stop myself from cutting onions and crying like a baby. I would really like to experience a Flyers Cup run again, because hockey's actually fun when teams are good, and that hasn't happened in a very long time, and it's unacceptable. I trust Jeffrey Lurie completely to turn around the Philadelphia Flyers as a franchise, and Comcast, please sell to him immediately, because when he does that, he can also buy the incoming WNBA franchise and get Dawn Staley to come be the head coach and go compete with the Philadelphia 76ers. That I would love to support. Do you hear me, Jeffrey Lurie? If you want to go after that son of a bitch Josh Harris as much as I do, it's why I took a complete year off the Sixers, by the way, because of that son of a bitch buying the Commanders. Probably didn't even want to tell you about it. If you want to go to war with Josh Harris, let's do it, Jeffrey Lurie. Let's do it. Let's make that Center City thing that they're proposing an atrocity. Let's make that WNBA team so fucking popular that no one cares about what Josh Harris does with the Sixers until he relieves himself of duty from owning that franchise. I want that son of a bitch gone and out of Philadelphia so bad. So bad. Does no one else feel this way? I felt like I was in the loud minority of, like, Josh Harris owning the Commanders is fucked up, and it's going to actually make 76ers, Philadelphia Eagles partnerships in the future really hard. You know, they're not going to communicate. They're not going to be at each other's events probably moving forward. The Sixers really want to stand on their own. Let them stand on their own. They'll fucking fail, just like every other property that Josh Harris touches. I want him gone. So, Jeffrey, let's go do this thing. I am on board to completely do that. And the last thing I have for you is, this is why you got to join our Discord, even though Barney will drive you insane. There's so many good people in there with lots of great questions. And I'm starting questions for the pod starting today with this episode. So just going to answer 2 real quick and going to get to a few others as we go along in this offseason. And Don was chiming in saying, what's my way too early Eagles record prediction for this year? And I didn't do a schedule release thing yet. So I think I'm going to do an expanded version of this, but 12 wins. 12 wins. No doubt about it. Number 1 seed. The 49ers got the Madden curse thing going, which I didn't really kind of believe in, but since they're on it, I just feel like bad things are going to happen to that team. Wishing no injuries, of course, just lots of losses and maybe Deebo Samuel crying in his diapers. But, yeah, I think this is a 12-win team for sure. And I believe it's Ali. And if it's Ali, I apologize, but I'm pretty sure it's Ali. Has 2 great questions. Wide receiver 3. Does Howie stick with Smith, Wilson, and Campbell to kind of battle it out for wide receiver 3, or should they make a trade? You tell me if I'm crazy on this, and you're probably going to say, yes, John, you're crazy. I've been advocating for the Eagles to go knock on the Browns' door and just see where our good friend Amari Cooper is at. I know he wants a new contract. I understand that we do not want to get caught in a Jets Hassan Riddick situation, which seems like it's going swimmingly well for the Jets franchise. Good job on them once again. But if Howie can do some magic, it does free up about $20 million for the Browns. When you get in this situation, I mean, he's 31, and yes, he's probably looking for another contract, but I doubt he gets another long-term contract anyway. If you think he can show his skills off better, being the wide receiver 1 for the Browns, I get it. I guess he would probably think that way too, but I would just like to see if we can pry that wonderful man away from the awful town of Cleveland for a 5th or lower. I'd even consider a 4th, and Cleveland gets a return on that. And it's overkill, and we don't need it, and I don't know where the ball will be distributed, but if they were already thinking of Devontae Parker, I mean, Amari Cooper is that on steroids, and Amari Cooper doesn't want to retire. So very important there. I don't know. You think I'm crazy on that? Secondly, which is the most important position for the Eagles to address right now? Wide receiver 3, pass rusher, safety, pass rusher, without a doubt. Ultimately, I think Justin Simmons actually still ends up on the Eagles somehow. And it sounds like Jets fans right now are really pissed off that Bryce Huff is not there right now. At least he knew the scheme. He was coming in. They're all freaking out and sweating bullets. So I'm actually glad Bryce Huff wants to be here. And why wouldn't you be after looking at that? Bryce Huff is like, please never send me back. Please, God. If he ends up being the next Brandon Graham, Howie's a genius. I really don't know what my take is on him yet. I've been very Bryce Huffless in terms of tape. I know what he did against the Eagles, but that's pretty much it. So I'm really excited to see him blow up here, if that's the case. I'm hoping for the best with that. That being said, that's going to do it for Bell and the Birdman. I really appreciate you hanging out and listening to another episode. Make sure you're subscribing and listening, and I'll be back on YouTube eventually, but we're just doing audio for now. I got to get some of this rust off, And, man, Elliott Shore Parks, what a coward. That's all. That's all I got to say, and I appreciate you tuning in. I'll talk to you next week.